Berlin, January 30th, 1933. Across the capital, morning newspapers roll off the presses, stories about politics, markets, and speeches. But inside one building on Kochstrasse, the presses run a little slower. The men working them know that every printed word today might be their last taste of freedom. At the heart of that newsroom stands Otto Braun, a 42-year-old editor of Berliner Tageblatt, one of Germany's most respected papers. For more than 2 decades, Otto has lived by one conviction: that truth must outlast fear. He fought in the last war, returned with shrapnel in his leg, and devoted himself to exposing the lies that had led men into trenches. But this morning, as he scans the final proofs, he feels that same sense of dread return. Only now the enemy wears a suit instead of a helmet. Overnight, Germany has changed. Adolf Hitler has been appointed Chancellor. Across Berlin, crowds gather in celebration. Flags hang from windows. A sea of brown uniforms fills the streets, chanting in rhythm like a single voice. For some, it feels like rebirth. For Otto, it feels like the slow closing of a door. In the newsroom, phones ring with nervous energy. Junior reporters whisper about new press restrictions rumored to be coming from the Reich Chancellery. One man laughs it off. Another stares at his typewriter, frozen. Otto watches them all, knowing what none of them will admit: that truth has just been placed under new management. For 20 years, the German press had been among the freest in the world. Every idea, every criticism, every argument could find a home in print. Otto had once written editorials defending that freedom, calling it the soul of democracy. Now he holds a sheet of paper, his own editorial for that morning, and wonders if it will be the last time he can speak without permission. He reads the headline one final time: "A Nation at the Crossroads." The piece urges readers to hold faith in reason, not rage. It calls for unity through honesty, not hate. It is cautious, respectful, yet brave enough to be dangerous. Outside his window, Otto spots a brown-uniformed figure leaning against a lamppost, smoking. The man's gaze never leaves the newsroom windows. He wears no badge, no official mark. But Otto understands. Watchers have already been assigned. Truth now requires surveillance. In the corner of the room, the managing editor quietly tears down a poster of the newspaper's founder. Another rolls up old issues for storage, as if saving fragments of a dying species. The sound of the presses echoes through the walls, a mechanical heartbeat of a free nation gasping for air. Otto walks through the editorial floor, pausing beside each desk. He knows these faces, men and women who once debated philosophy between deadlines, who argued about art and democracy over black coffee. Now their talk has turned to survival. Some will adapt, some will vanish. At his desk lies a telegram from a correspondent in Munich. It reads, "Local authorities shut 2 socialist papers. Orders from new leadership. Urgent." Otto folds it carefully, slips it into his jacket, and says nothing. He knows that in a few weeks, Berliner Tageblatt will face the same fate. He remembers the First World War, not the battles, but the silence afterward. The years when veterans like him returned home and asked what it had all been for. Back then, truth had been a casualty of pride. Now it's being executed by policy. The paper's owner phones in, voice trembling, warning Otto to be cautious. "The new government is sensitive to criticism," he says. Otto replies only, "So is every tyranny," at the beginning. He signs off on the last edition before noon. The typesetters begin arranging the front page. Each metallic click feels like a farewell. As the first sheets roll out, Otto holds one in his hands, still warm, still breathing, and stares at his own words. It feels like looking into a mirror that might soon shatter. Across the street, the brown-uniformed man finishes his cigarette, drops it, and walks away. For now, the watchers are content to observe. The real control will come later, with laws, with decrees, with the slow reshaping of language itself. Otto lingers by the window, watching Berlin move. The trams pass, children walk to school, vendors shout in the distance. Everything looks the same, but the air feels rewritten. He knows that by tomorrow, even the word freedom may require permission to print. He returns to his office, opens a leather notebook, and writes a single line. This morning, the truth still speaks, but it whispers. He closes it carefully. That notebook will later become something much more than a diary. It will become his secret archive, his defense against a world rewriting itself one headline at a time. In the afternoon, Otto joins the staff in sending the paper to distribution. The final free edition of Berliner Tageblatt leaves the building under gray skies. No one cheers. No one knows it's the last one born of pure honesty. As evening falls, the sound of marching grows louder from the streets below. The shouts of celebration echo through the walls, a chorus for a new Germany. Otto doesn't look out the window. He knows what he would see: torches, flags, order disguised as unity. Instead, he stays at his desk long after everyone has gone, staring at a blank sheet of paper in his typewriter. The page waits for tomorrow's story. But tomorrow, he knows, the story will already be written. Not by him, but by someone else. And in that moment, as the clock strikes midnight and the last presses fall silent, Otto Braun understands something few do that night. The battle for truth has already begun. Berlin, February 27, 1933. Smoke rises above the city like a warning written in the sky. That night, the Reichstag, the symbol of Germany's democracy, burns. Flames consume its great dome, casting long shadows over the government district. Sirens wail. Crowds gather. Soldiers shout. The air itself feels heavy with accusation. Otto Braun stands among the crowd, notebook in hand. The heat from the fire brushes against his face, but what chills him is the silence of those watching. No one asks how it started. No one dares. Within hours, the police have already decided who to blame: the communists. It's too quick, too perfect. Otto knows this pattern. Every tragedy will now become a tool. By morning, new laws are announced. The Reichstag Fire decree suspends basic rights: freedom of speech, of press, of assembly. Newspapers are forbidden to publish without permission. Overnight, democracy's voice is reduced to an echo. When Otto arrives at Berliner Tageblatt, the building is surrounded. Brown uniformed guards stand at every entrance, rifles slung but unnecessary. Fear alone is now the weapon. He shows his press card, but the guard stares at it for too long before allowing him in. Inside, the once lively newsroom feels like a courtroom awaiting verdict. His friend Martin Schneider, a crime reporter, sits at his desk tearing pages from his notebook. He looks up at Otto with tired eyes and says nothing. They both know the danger of saying the wrong thing, or even the right thing, at the wrong time. Not long after, a convoy of black cars stops outside. Uniformed men enter the newsroom with papers of their own. Orders from the new Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, led by Dr. Joseph Goebbels. Every newspaper is now required to register with the ministry. From this day forward, every word printed must serve the national interest. Otto listens as the orders are read aloud. The sentences are short, bureaucratic, harmless on paper, but in them hides the end of truth. The new rules are presented as protection, not censorship. We are ensuring harmony in the press, the official says. But Otto understands. Harmony means obedience. A few desks away, two officers approach Martin Schneider. They confiscate his notes, check his drawers, and motion for him to stand. Martin protests that he has done nothing wrong. One officer replies calmly, "Your stories stirred unrest." No one speaks as Martin is led away. His typewriter remains on, a single sheet of half-written truth trapped inside. By noon, news spreads that hundreds of journalists have been arrested. Within weeks, more than 1,000 publications vanish. Their presses seized, their offices emptied. On the walls of Otto's newsroom, new posters appear. One people, one voice, one leader. The transformation is swift and methodical. Editors are summoned to daily meetings at the propaganda ministry. They are told which stories to publish, which to omit, and which to distort. Every headline is now a weapon, every omission an order. Otto's desk fills with papers marked approved and revised. He notices a new kind of exhaustion in his colleagues, the exhaustion of conscience. In the days that follow, Otto is summoned to the ministry for the first time. The building, once a cultural office, now hums with controlled efficiency. He walks through corridors lined with slogans about unity and purity. In a large hall, Goebbels himself addresses the editors. He speaks with precision and fire, describing the press as an instrument of national education. The words sound noble until you understand their purpose. Otto stands among dozens of other editors, most nodding eagerly. Some take notes, others stare blankly, already broken. Goebbels ends with a phrase that will echo in Otto's mind for years. The people will think what we tell them to think. Back at the office, Otto receives a folder marked Guidelines for Press Conduct. The first rule, criticism of the government, is equivalent to treason. The second, all foreign reports must reflect Germany's dignity and strength. The third, no mention of internal conflict, unemployment, or dissent. The unspoken rule is simpler. Fear edits faster than any red pencil. One night, Otto walks home past the darkened windows of what used to be rival newspapers. Their names are being scraped off signs, replaced with state-approved titles. He sees a poster with Goebbels' face and the slogan, "Words can be weapons." Otto whispers to himself, "Then truth must be armor." But even as he says it, he isn't sure armor will be enough. At home, Elsa greets him with quiet worry. Their teenage son, Klaus, sits by the radio, listening to speeches about loyalty and destiny. The boy repeats phrases he hears from his teachers about purity, unity, pride. Otto realizes the war for minds has already reached his own home. Late that night, Otto writes in his hidden notebook, "They burn books in public, but the quieter fires are in the offices, the words we never print." Weeks pass. Each day brings new orders from the ministry. Stories about corruption disappear. Reports about hardship are banned. Even the weather pages carry propaganda, describing sunshine during rallies that took place under rain. Reality is being edited line by line. Otto's resolve wavers. He knows that refusal means ruin. For him, for Elsa, for Klaus. The system doesn't need to imprison every journalist. It only needs to make them afraid enough to silence themselves. Then comes his first test. He receives an assignment to write about the national awakening, describing the rise of the new government as a miracle of unity. He hesitates, then writes the article with professional skill but personal shame. When it appears in print the next morning, his byline feels like a scar. The paper sells out within hours. The ministry congratulates the staff for patriotic excellence, but Otto feels nothing. He walks to his desk, removes Martin Schneider's old typewriter sheet, and hides it inside his jacket. A single unfinished report on the Reichstag Fire. The paper is yellowed, half burned, but the last words are still visible. It began too perfectly to be an accident. Otto folds it carefully, adds it to his secret notebook, and closes the drawer. For the first time in his life, Otto Braun understands what it means to write in chains. And somewhere deep inside the ministry, a new kind of war has already begun. Not fought with armies or weapons, but with headlines, phrases, and the silence between them. Spring, 1933. The city hums with the illusion of order. Flags flutter from rooftops, parades fill the boulevards, and loudspeakers praise a new dawn. But for men like Otto Braun, the silence behind those shouts grows louder every day. In the newsroom of Berliner Tageblatt, the rhythm of work has changed. Every morning now begins with a sheet of paper from the propaganda ministry, the daily guidelines. Printed neatly in black ink, they dictate which stories to write, what angle to take, and what tone to maintain. The page even suggests specific adjectives, as if emotion itself were being standardized. At the top of each page, one line repeats like a commandment. There is no truth outside the Reich. Otto reads it each day without expression. But inside, it cuts deeper than any order he received during the Great War. He once believed words were sacred, that journalism was the conscience of a nation. Now, conscience is a liability. The new editor's law, known as the Schriftleitergesetz, arrives in the spring. It declares that only racially pure and politically loyal citizens may work in journalism. Every editor must prove ancestry going back 3 generations. Otto watches colleagues line up to submit documents proving their worthiness to write. Some fail. Their desks are cleared before lunch. Otto's turn comes the next week. He hands in family records, school certificates, and letters of military service. The official reviewing them barely looks up. "You fought in the last war?" the man asks. Otto nods. "Then you understand loyalty," the official replies. The papers are stamped. He is approved. But the ink on that stamp feels like a brand. Every day, Otto attends the mandatory press conferences at the propaganda ministry. Goebbels himself often presides, walking among the editors like a conductor before an orchestra. He speaks of art, psychology, and destiny, weaving them together until manipulation sounds like philosophy. He praises modern journalism as the weapon of the spirit. The hall fills with applause. Otto claps with them, quietly, mechanically, because not clapping draws attention. After each session, the editors file out into the bright courtyard. They stand in small groups, repeating the new vocabulary. Harmony, unity, awakening, purification. Words that once described ideas now describe obedience. Back at the office, Otto finds the newsroom rearranged. A new desk appears near the entrance. A government observer, introduced as an assistant for coordination. He never writes, never speaks much, but watches every story pass across his table before it goes to print. He is young, polite, and unnecessary, except for what his presence represents. Among the younger staff is a new hire, Anna Fischer, barely in her 20s, sharp-eyed and fearless. She joined the paper just as others were leaving, and she carries herself with quiet defiance. When Otto first meets her, she reminds him of himself years ago, idealistic, convinced that truth cannot die. She questions the new rules, whispers that no law can own words. Otto warns her softly to be careful. She smiles, unconvinced. 1 week later, her desk is empty. No explanation. No file, no trace. Someone replaces her nameplate before noon. The silence that follows is heavier than any announcement. Otto doesn't ask where she went. He already knows not to. The transformation of the paper continues. The DNB, the official news agency, becomes their only source of information. Every dispatch arrives already edited, approved, and framed. Journalists no longer report. They rewrite. Even headlines are pre-written, ready for use. The newsroom that once argued over ideas now argues only over phrasing. At night, Otto stays late, alone. He edits articles that say nothing but must appear important. He removes words like hunger, protest, doubt. He adds words like recovery, discipline, pride. Each sentence feels like a surrender. Yet he continues, because stopping would mean more than unemployment. At home, Elsa notices the change in him. He speaks less, eats little, sleeps poorly. Their son Klaus, now 16, begins repeating phrases from school about the greatness of the new Germany. Otto listens, heart heavy, realizing that propaganda has already succeeded where censorship cannot reach, in shaping belief itself. One evening, Otto writes in his hidden notebook, "They have discovered something stronger than censorship." Fear edits faster than any editor. It writes before we do. He hides the notebook beneath the floorboards of his office. It becomes his true work now, a parallel record of lies and reality, side by side. Each day, he copies the approved version of a story, then writes what really happened. It is his quiet act of rebellion, one that no reader will see, but history might. The next morning, the ministry's messenger delivers a new order. All newspapers must dedicate their front page to an upcoming rally, a celebration of unity. Otto knows the rally will be staged, with crowds carefully arranged and photographers positioned for perfect angles. But the story must describe it as spontaneous joy. He writes the piece exactly as instructed, his hand steady, his tone neutral. The next day, the article appears with his name under it. Readers send letters praising his patriotic spirit. The ministry sends a commendation. His colleagues congratulate him. Only Elsa sees through it when he comes home that night. She asks if he is proud. Otto says nothing. Pride has no place left in him. The next week, an anonymous letter arrives at the office. It contains no words, only a photograph. Anna Fisher, standing at a train station under police guard. Otto burns the letter in his ashtray. He keeps the image in his mind. By summer, Berliner Tageblatt has become unrecognizable. Its pages gleam with official optimism. Its editorials echo the ministry's tone. Readers see confidence. Otto sees control. Every newspaper now prints the same stories, the same praise, the same illusion of unity. The only difference between them is typography. Otto's final act of quiet rebellion that season is small but deliberate. In an article about the renewal of German spirit, he slips in a phrase, one that looks harmless, almost patriotic. The light of truth, once lit, cannot be extinguished. No one notices. The ministry approves it. The phrase appears in print, read by thousands. But for Otto, it is a message, a promise to himself that the light still exists somewhere beyond censorship. That night, he writes again in his secret notebook, "The press once served the people. Now it serves their fears." But even fear cannot erase memory. As long as one man remembers what really happened, truth still breathes. He closes the notebook and locks his drawer. The next morning, as the ministry's courier delivers new guidelines, Otto feels the weight of every lie he's ever printed. Yet he knows he will write again today. Because the war for words is not won with resistance alone. It survived through endurance. And so, the presses roll on, printing obedience disguised as news. The editor's protocol is complete, and with it, the first battlefield of the mind is fully built. Berlin, 1934, a new order has settled over Germany, polished and disciplined. The streets look cleaner, the parades more synchronized, the speeches grander. To the outside world, it appears that the chaos of the past decade has vanished. Inside the country, truth itself has been rebuilt, brick by brick, lie by lie. For Otto Braun, editor of Berliner Tageblatt, the transformation is complete. His once free newsroom now feels like a machine, efficient, precise, and entirely obedient. Every sentence, every photograph, every headline serves the same invisible blueprint, the construction of illusion. Each morning, Otto receives the same packet of typed directives from the Deutsches Nachrichtenbüro, the state-controlled news agency known simply as DNB. It is now the only legal source of news in Germany. Every newspaper subscribes to it. Every story begins and ends with it. The system is perfect. No censorship is needed anymore. There's nothing left to censor. At first, Otto resisted quietly, editing small truths into harmless phrases. But even that is becoming impossible. The press conferences at the ministry have turned into daily sermons. Goebbels speaks of destiny and devotion, blending faith with politics until even doubt sounds sinful. His words are persuasive, hypnotic. He does not command journalists. He converts them. Among Otto's colleagues is Friedrich Lang, once a skeptical reporter, now a devoted believer. Friedrich thrives under the new system. He writes articles praising Germany's rebirth with genuine pride. his pen fueled by conviction rather than fear. He believes propaganda is patriotism, that truth is whatever keeps the nation united. Otto watches him with quiet sorrow. Friedrich represents the other kind of captivity, the one that feels like freedom. The Berliner Tageblatt newsroom now runs like a military unit. The front pages are drafted before events happen. Speeches are summarized before they're delivered. Even the photographs are arranged in advance. The ministry sends visual guidance, instructing papers which images best reflect national morale. A soldier helping a child, a worker smiling beside new machinery, all staged, all rehearsed. Otto knows that the greatest deception is not in the words, but in the rhythm of repetition. The same phrases echo across every newspaper, every radio broadcast, every classroom: strength through unity, peace through vigilance. One people, one destiny. Day after day, these phrases replace thought with certainty. Repetition turns illusion into memory. Otto realizes that Goebbels doesn't simply want control over facts. He wants control over imagination. He sees it most clearly in how history itself is being rewritten. Books vanish from libraries, old newspaper archives are sealed, and entire sections of the past are quietly erased. When the ministry releases a corrected version of events, no one argues. The correction becomes the truth. In March, Otto receives instructions to prepare coverage for a new set of laws. They are called protective measures, designed, the ministry claims, to preserve the purity and harmony of the German people. In reality, they are the Nuremberg laws, stripping entire groups of citizens of their rights. Otto knows exactly what they mean. He knows who they will hurt. But his job is to present them as progress. He writes the headline exactly as dictated: a milestone for national renewal. That night, he sits alone in his office long after the lights go out, staring at the printed page. For the first time, the lies make him physically tremble. He sees how easily language can turn cruelty into policy, and policy into pride. Friedrich Lang enters quietly, carrying a bottle of wine to celebrate what he calls a historic day. Otto refuses to drink. Friedrich shrugs. "You take everything too seriously," he says. "The world needs strong leadership. The press is helping people believe again." Otto studies him for a moment. Friedrich truly believes it. And that's when Otto understands the final stage of psychological warfare, when lies no longer require force, because belief has replaced truth. By 1935, the system runs so smoothly, it no longer feels new. Every story, every headline follows an invisible rhythm. The same phrases appear in hundreds of papers at once, often word for word. Editors no longer question where the stories come from. They only compete to write them faster. One afternoon, Otto attends another ministry briefing. Goebbels smiles as he explains a new project, a weekly newspaper supplement called The German Spirit. It will highlight art, family, and culture, a gentler form of propaganda designed to win hearts rather than command minds. Goebbels speaks softly that day, almost kindly. "The people will not resist what they love," he says. Otto writes the line down. He knows it will echo through history. Back in his office, Otto notices how quickly even he has adapted to the routine. The same man who once fought for independent thought now edits lies with mechanical precision. He realizes the greatest danger of this system is not what it demands, but what it erases, the instinct to question. Still, part of him fights back in silence. Each night, he writes in his hidden notebook, documenting the invisible architecture around him. They have built a world out of mirrors. Every lie reflects another, until no one remembers which side is real. And the reflections are beautiful enough to believe. His handwriting grows unsteady as months pass. He records not only facts, but feelings: fear, guilt, resignation. The notebook becomes a lifeline, the last connection to the truth he once lived for. Then, one morning, Otto receives a notice. The ministry will be conducting press evaluations, a polite phrase for loyalty audits. Every journalist will be reviewed based on attitude, compliance, and reliability. The goal is not to find traitors, but to remind everyone that being watched is permanent. The inspection comes and goes. Otto passes easily. He smiles at the right moments, praises the right slogans, and the ministry commends his balanced patriotism. He returns home that evening and writes in his journal, "The perfect propaganda system is one where even its victims appear willing." As 1935 draws to a close, Otto's world seems calm, almost peaceful. The economy is improving, the streets are orderly, and the headlines glow with optimism. But beneath that calm lies the most dangerous illusion of all. The truth no longer matters. For the German people, life feels predictable again. For Otto Braun, that predictability feels like suffocation. And somewhere in the ministry, Joseph Goebbels looks over the latest reports and smiles. The architecture of deception is complete. The press, once the guardian of democracy, now stands proudly at the front line of illusion, serving not the people, but the idea of control itself. Berlin, 1936. The city has learned to smile on command. Flags rise with the morning, banners stretch across streets, and every radio hums with pride. The world is coming to Berlin. The Olympic Games will show the strength and grace of the new Germany. For Otto Braun, the excitement feels hollow. The same government that censors every headline now opens its doors to the world, eager to prove its innocence. And Otto, the reluctant editor of Berliner Tageblatt, has been given a new assignment: to write about Germany's spirit of openness. In preparation for the Games, anti-Semitic signs vanish overnight. Shops once marked with insults are freshly painted. The ministry orders photographers to capture cheerful crowds, smiling athletes, and clean streets. Reporters are instructed to describe Berlin as a city reborn, modern, peaceful, welcoming. Otto knows what lies beneath the surface. He sees the fear behind the smiles, the quiet disappearances that never reach print. But for a few weeks, the world believes the performance. Even foreign journalists, restricted in where they can go, send home glowing reports. Goebbels has staged not an event, but an illusion. At the ministry, editors receive detailed scripts for the Games. Emphasize the discipline and hospitality of the German people. The memo says, "Avoid mention of politics. Focus on unity." Each article becomes a piece of theater. Every word is rehearsed. Otto writes his assigned stories without comment. But that summer, a new habit forms. Late at night, after the newsroom empties, he opens his secret notebook. He copies every instruction he receives, then writes what really happened beside it. The pages fill with truth, hidden beneath the language of propaganda. It is no longer just a diary. It becomes evidence. At home, his wife Elsa senses the change. Otto speaks less now, but his silence feels heavier. Their son, Klaus, 16 and proud in his school uniform, reads the paper each morning and praises his father's patriotism. Otto listens in quiet pain. His son admires the lies he is forced to write. Else tries to comfort him, but she too feels the walls closing in. Neighbors speak in cautious tones, glancing over shoulders before finishing sentences. Trust has evaporated from ordinary life. The real victory of propaganda, Otto realizes, is not just shaping belief, it's destroying connection. One night, Otto returns home later than usual. Else meets him at the door, pale and anxious. Two men had visited earlier, asking questions about his work, his friends, his political attitude. They were polite, but their politeness was worse than anger. Otto knows what it means. He is being watched. Within days, he notices the presence of a man who appears wherever he goes. At the cafe, near the tram stop, across the street from the office. Always distant, never approaching. Otto later learns his name, Werner Koch, a Gestapo officer assigned to observe information personnel. Otto carries on as if unaware, But every word he writes now feels like a test. Every mistake could be fatal, not for him alone, but for Elsa and Klaus. Then, one afternoon, a colleague makes a quiet joke about Hitler during lunch. The next morning, his desk is empty. No one speaks of it. The empty chair becomes a reminder that silence is safer than laughter. Otto's isolation deepens. He stops attending social gatherings, stops confiding in friends. He begins to live entirely in two realities, the one he prints and the one he records in secret. The split begins to consume him. His private journal grows by the week. He documents the staging of the Olympics, the manipulation of international reporters, the ministry's instructions, even the names of editors who boast of their loyalty. He writes with precision, not emotion. He knows someday, if the truth is ever free again, someone will need this record. August arrives. The Olympics end in triumph. The newspapers declare Germany the heart of a new, peaceful Europe. Foreign visitors praise the hospitality, the order, the perfection. Goebbels smiles for the cameras. The world has seen exactly what he wanted them to see. But inside Otto, the victory feels poisonous. He understands that this success will embolden the regime further. The deception has worked too well. One evening, while reviewing final editions, Otto notices Klaus waiting outside the office. The boy's expression is tense, uncertain. When they walk home together, Klaus asks a question that pierces deeper than any interrogation. Why do your words say things your eyes don't believe? Otto doesn't answer. He cannot. The streetlights seem brighter than usual, the air too still. He knows someone could be listening. At home, Elsa senses the tension, but says nothing. The family eats in silence. Outside, a patrol car passes, headlights sweeping across the windows. For a moment, the light freezes on Otto's face. Else reaches for his hand under the table. He doesn't pull away. That night, after everyone sleeps, Otto opens his notebook and writes, "I used to believe truth could survive by itself. I was wrong. Truth needs witnesses, even silent ones." Weeks later, the ministry issues a new directive. All editors must undergo loyalty verification. Files will be reviewed, personal correspondence checked. Otto burns letters from old colleagues and hides his notebook inside a hollow beam in the attic. He begins to write shorter entries, careful, coded phrases only he can understand. As the months pass, he becomes adept at pretending. In meetings, he praises the efficiency of the propaganda system. He smiles when spoken to, signs documents without hesitation. He survives through performance. But one evening, Elsa confronts him quietly. "You're fading," she says. "Every day you look smaller inside." Otto nods. "It's the price," he whispers. She doesn't ask for what. She already knows. The next morning, Otto returns to the newsroom. A memo waits on his desk. The ministry congratulates the paper for its contribution to the success of the Olympic narrative. A bonus is enclosed. Otto tears the letter in half and drops it into his drawer. Outside his office window, he notices Werner Koch again, standing by a lamppost, pretending to read a newspaper. Their eyes meet for the first time. Koch folds his paper, gives a faint nod, and walks away. Otto closes the blinds and takes out his hidden notebook. He writes one final line for the year. "The truth costs more than a man can pay." But the debt must still be recorded. He hides the notebook back in its place. From this point onward, Otto Braun lives as two men. One who writes what he's told, and another who records what must never be said. He no longer knows which one will survive, but he knows that the real war, the war for truth, has only begun. Berlin, November 9th, 1938. The city sleeps beneath uneasy silence. Hours before dawn, a single order travels across Germany. Quiet, efficient, unstoppable. It begins with whispers in police stations and party offices, and by midnight, it becomes thunder. Windows shatter. Doors splinter. The night fills with the sound of destruction that no newspaper will ever describe truthfully. From his apartment window, Otto Braun watches fires rise across the city. Storefronts burn, their glass facades glimmering like frozen lightning. The flames reflect off wet cobblestones, casting orange streaks through the fog. It looks like chaos, but Otto recognizes precision. This isn't rage, it's orchestration. He thinks of his earlier assignments, the headlines praising order, the editorials promising unity. Now, the same words echo back at him as irony. Unity, he thinks, built on ash. Else wakes beside him, frightened by the noise. Stay away from the window, he tells her quietly. In the street below, uniformed men march past carrying torches. Some neighbors cheer, others hide behind curtains. The fear has become so deep that silence now feels like safety. By morning, the fires die down, leaving the streets lined with broken glass. The newspapers already have their instructions. The ministry's morning dispatch arrives promptly, crisp and cold. Yesterday's disturbances were spontaneous expressions of public outrage following the assassination of a German diplomat. No mention of coordination, no acknowledgement of orders. The phrasing is deliberate. The lie must sound plausible enough for readers to believe it by choice. Otto sits at his desk in Berliner Tageblatt, staring at the blank page waiting for his story. He knows what must be written, that the violence was unfortunate but understandable, that the people acted out of patriotism. The guidelines even provide sample sentences. He reads them twice, then begins typing. Each word feels heavier than the one before. When he finishes, the article is perfect by the ministry standards. Precise, obedient, hollow. The headline reads, "A nation reacts to an insult." As the presses roar to life, Otto feels nothing but numbness. His fingers tremble slightly as he signs the approval sheet. That night, Elsa confronts him. "How can you keep doing this?" she asks. "Every lie you print keeps them stronger." Otto looks at her, exhausted. "If I stop," he says quietly, "they'll take everything, even what little truth remains." She doesn't answer. The silence between them feels like another form of censorship, the kind born not from fear of punishment, but from despair. Days later, their son Klaus returns home from his youth training program. He wears his uniform proudly, the same brown color Otto now associates with loss. Klaus speaks of loyalty, destiny, and sacrifice. He believes every word he says. When Otto looks at his son, he sees the true victory of propaganda, not in the papers, but in the minds it has shaped. The next generation doesn't need to be silenced. They already believe the script. At the office, colleagues avoid discussing the destruction. Officially, nothing happened beyond civil unrest. Yet Otto can't escape the images burned into his memory. Shattered windows, looted stores, frightened faces. He writes nothing about them. He's not allowed to. A few days later, a letter arrives at his desk. It bears the stamp of the propaganda ministry. His hands shake slightly as he opens it. Inside, a short note praises his responsible reporting during times of national difficulty. A commendation for silence. He places the letter in his drawer beside another piece of paper. A photograph of Anna Fischer, the young journalist who vanished 5 years earlier. 2 documents. One rewarded lie, one missing truth. Otto's health begins to falter. He eats little, sleeps less. Else worries, but he brushes it off. It's only fatigue, and he says, but in truth, it's something deeper, the erosion of conscience. One evening, he visits the ruins of a small bookstore near Friedrichstrasse. The owner, an old man he once interviewed, stands in the doorway amid the wreckage. Their eyes meet, but no words are exchanged. The man simply shakes his head. Otto wants to apologize, but no apology feels large enough. That night, Otto sits at his desk long after everyone has gone. The city outside is dark again, calm again, pretending again. He opens his hidden notebook, the only place where he can still speak honestly. His handwriting trembles as he writes, I have become what I feared most, the mouthpiece of a lie. But if I stop, the truth dies completely. If I continue, I die slowly with it. He stares at the words for a long time, then closes the notebook and hides it back under the floorboard. When he gets home, Elsa waits in silence. She doesn't ask what he wrote. She doesn't need to. They both understand that his spirit is fading faster than his body. Days later, Otto learns that his son Klaus has been chosen for an advanced training group, a recognition of loyalty. The news brings pride to Elsa, but pain to Otto. He realizes that propaganda has not only conquered the press, but also his own family. Weeks pass. The newspaper prints endless stories of recovery and strength. The broken glass is swept away, the ruins repainted, the headlines rewritten. Germany smiles again. The world moves on. But inside Otto, something breaks that cannot be repaired. He no longer believes he can protect his family by compliance. Silence no longer feels like safety. It feels like surrender. Late one night, he takes out the ministry's commendation letter, tears it in half, and burns it in an ashtray. The smoke curls upward, faint and gray. Else watches without a word. She knows something inside him has changed forever. Otto looks out the window at the quiet street. For the first time in years, he feels a spark of defiance. Small, fragile, but alive. In that moment, he makes a silent vow. He will no longer only record the truth in secret. He will find a way to make it heard, even if it means risking everything. The fires of November have turned to ash, but in Otto Braun's heart, a new fire begins, not of destruction, but of resistance. Berlin, 1939, the city stands at attention. Soldiers march through the Brandenburg Gate. Posters promise glory and destiny. The radio declares that Germany has taken defensive measures in Poland. The crowds cheer. The war has begun. For Otto Braun, it marks the beginning of another kind of war, one fought in silence, between truth and survival. By now, Berliner Tageblatt has become a flawless instrument of propaganda. Each morning, the DNB sends stories crafted to perfection. Editors merely arrange them, polish the phrasing, and deliver them to the public. No one questions sources anymore. Truth has become irrelevant. But Otto still remembers what real journalism feels like. He can't erase the old instincts, the hunger to verify, the need to question. Those instincts, dangerous as they are, guide him toward the underground network forming quietly beneath the surface of the capital. It begins with a sermon. One Sunday, Otto slips into a small church on Wilhelmstrasse, seeking a moment of stillness. The man preaching that morning is Pastor Wilhelm Hartmann, a soft-spoken clergyman known for his courage in using scripture as resistance. He speaks carefully, avoiding forbidden words, yet every sentence carries meaning. When truth is chained, he says, silence becomes a form of worship. After the service, Otto waits by the door. The pastor recognizes his face, the editor who once defended free speech. Their handshake is brief, cautious, but enough. Hartmann invites him to visit again. It is not a casual offer. Weeks later, Otto learns that the pastor is part of a small network smuggling information out of Germany. Coded reports, letters, documents, anything that can prove what is really happening behind the curtain of propaganda. They work through diplomats, couriers, and foreign journalists based in neutral Switzerland. At first, Otto hesitates. His every movement is watched by Werner Koch, the same Gestapo officer who once lingered near his building. Yet something inside Otto has shifted since Kristallnacht. He no longer fears losing his position, only his purpose. He agrees to help. His task is simple, but perilous. Embedding fragments of truth within the ministry-approved stories, using phrases, numbers, and patterns that seem harmless, but carry hidden meaning. The information will be read by foreign analysts trained to decode it. The first message he sends is a small act of rebellion. In an article about a successful military operation, He slips in a line about unexpected delays in the East. It looks like an ordinary phrase, but the placement of certain words, every fifth letter forming a coded sentence, tells another story. Poland in ruins. Civilians suffer. The article is published. No one in Berlin notices. But days later, Otto receives a folded note at his desk. It contains only one word: received. He burns the paper immediately. The ashes cling to his fingers like guilt. From that moment on, Otto lives two lives. By day, he edits the government's lies. By night, he records the truth in his secret journal and sends fragments through coded reports. His writing becomes sharper, colder, stripped of emotion, focused on precision. Each day feels like walking a tightrope over an abyss. One wrong phrase, one careless gesture could expose everything. Werner Koch still watches, appearing at random times with polite questions that sound like warnings. "We read your articles closely, Herr Braun," he says one afternoon. "They have a tone of restraint. Try to write with more enthusiasm." Otto nods. Of course, but he never changes his tone. The less emotion he shows, the less suspicion he draws. He meets Pastor Hartmann in hidden places, behind old churches, in deserted courtyards, sometimes under the noise of passing trams. Together, they plan how to smuggle his full journal out of Germany. It contains years of notes, propaganda directives, ministry memos, descriptions of censorship, lists of arrested journalists, a detailed record of deception. The plan is dangerous. The journal will be disguised as a technical manual, bound in plain brown cover, and carried across the border by a courier disguised as a supply merchant. As they prepare, the Gestapo tightens its grip. Curfews expand. Letters vanish in transit. The walls seem to have ears. Otto's health worsens, his hands trembling from exhaustion. Still, he writes every night, because truth, once suppressed, demands confession. One evening, Klaus returns home unexpectedly from his training post. He is 20 now, his face harder, his eyes older. The boy who once repeated slogans now speaks little. Something in him has changed. At dinner, Klaus tells his parents what he saw on the Eastern Front. Not victory, but devastation. "They told us we were liberating," he says quietly. "But I don't know who we're saving anymore." Otto's heart tightens. For years he feared propaganda had claimed his son. Now he sees cracks forming in that armor of belief. They eat in silence, the kind that carries understanding rather than fear. That night, Otto hides a note inside his journal. "The truth will return through our children." The next morning, Pastor Hartmann arrives with news. Their courier is ready. The journal will be sent to Zurich within the week. Otto feels both relief and dread. If the plan fails, it will mean death for everyone involved. The day before the transfer, Werner Koch visits the office again. His tone is casual, his eyes sharp. "You've been quiet lately, Braun," he says. "Almost too quiet." Otto forces a tired smile. "Age does that, Inspector." Koch studies him for a moment, then nods. "Be careful what you write. Words can outlive their author." When Koch leaves, Otto exhales slowly. He realizes the man's words are not a threat, but a prophecy. That night, under the dim light of his desk lamp, Otto finishes one final entry in his journal. "If I am caught, let these pages serve as witness." Truth can be delayed, not destroyed. He wraps the journal carefully in brown paper, ties it with string, and delivers it to Hartmann under the cover of night. They exchange no words, only a nod. The next morning, Otto walks to work, feeling strangely calm. The risk no longer matters. For the first time in years, he feels light, as if the burden of silence has lifted. Days pass with no sign of discovery. The courier crosses the border. The journal reaches Switzerland safely. Foreign papers soon begin hinting at secret German sources, exposing internal censorship. Otto reads the headlines in secret, heart pounding. His words have crossed the border. The truth breathes again, but success breeds danger. Werner Koch grows more suspicious. He visits Otto's office more frequently, asking about the missing reports, about foreign leaks. Otto answers carefully, but he knows the circle is tightening. Still, he continues his secret work. Because once truth escapes confinement, there's no returning it to silence. And though Otto Braun doesn't yet realize it, his underground effort, the courage of a few pens defying an empire of lies, will one day become part of the record that helps the world understand how words were turned into weapons. The resistance has begun. And its strongest soldier carries no gun, only ink. Berlin, winter 1942. Snow drifts across a silent city. The war has swallowed nearly every family in Germany. The streets are darker, thinner, quieter. Even the parades have lost their rhythm. For Otto Braun, now in his early 50s, time moves differently. He measures the days not by headlines, but by lies. Each morning, a new set of guidelines arrives from the ministry. Each one feels more desperate, more detached from reality. The war in the East has turned. Reports from Stalingrad trickled in. Casualties beyond comprehension. Entire divisions gone. Yet, the official bulletins describe strategic withdrawals, temporary setbacks, heroic resistance. Otto reads them with disbelief. He knows the truth. Germany is losing, and the ministry is running out of words to hide it. Inside Berliner Tageblatt, morale collapses behind the polished facade. Editors whisper privately about food shortages, about relatives who never return from the front. Yet every printed line remains triumphal. The contrast between what they know and what they print becomes unbearable. Friedrich Lang, once the most loyal believer, begins to falter. His hands shake when he writes. He still defends the system in public, but his confidence sounds rehearsed. One evening, he finds Otto alone in the office. "Do you ever wonder," Friedrich asks quietly, "if we've built something that can't stop lying, even to itself?" Otto doesn't answer. For years, he's waited for Friedrich to see through the illusion. Now that he does, the revelation feels tragic rather than hopeful. Friedrich walks away before Otto can respond. At home, Elsa watches her husband age faster than time. His hair has turned silver, his posture stooped. He works longer hours, but she knows it's not duty keeping him at his desk. It's fear. The Gestapo has grown ruthless with dissent. Otto's name still appears in the papers. His articles praised for their stability, but the praise feels like surveillance. Their son, Klaus, now 23, returns home from the Eastern Front. The boy who once believed in slogans now walks with a limp and stares too long into silence. His eyes are distant, older than his father's. They sit together one evening, sharing a modest meal. Klaus speaks softly, almost mechanically. "They told us we were saving Europe," he says, "but I saw villages erased, fields burned, and the news back home calls it victory." He looks at Otto. "You write those words." The accusation isn't angry, it's weary. Otto lowers his gaze. "I write to survive," he says, "but not everything I write is what it seems." Klaus frowns, unsure. Otto leads him to his desk and opens a hidden compartment. Inside lies a small stack of pages, copies of the journal he sent out years ago. The handwriting is careful, the margins filled with coded notes. "These are the real reports," Otto says quietly. "They're being read beyond the border. The truth still breathes somewhere." Klaus stares at the pages, realization washing over him. For the first time, he understands the contradiction that has consumed his father. The man who lies in public, but fights for truth in secret. That night, Klaus helps his father copy another section of the journal. They work in silence, their pens scratching softly under the dim lamp. It is the first time in years that Otto feels a sense of hope. The war outside may be lost, but the battle for truth continues at his desk. Meanwhile, the ministry tightens its control as the military situation worsens. Goebbels begins delivering speeches describing total war, urging Germans to give everything, including reason, to the cause. Posters appear everywhere, demanding loyalty without thought. The words grow more frantic, the tone more desperate. Otto recognizes the shift. When propaganda begins to scream, it means fear has entered its bloodstream. The Berliner Tageblatt now functions almost entirely as a morale machine. Reports of rationing are replaced by stories of generosity. Defeats become heroic delays. Even weather forecasts are adjusted to sound optimistic. But cracks are showing. Small mistakes slip through. Conflicting reports circulate. Some readers begin to sense the dissonance. Whispers spread through Berlin about the losses, about cities bombed to ruin, about the reality the papers deny. Inside the ministry, paranoia grows. Editors are questioned about loyalty. Files are reviewed. One morning, Otto learns that Friedrich Lang has been summoned for interrogation. No reason given. He leaves the office quietly that afternoon and never returns. Otto later hears that Friedrich was reassigned to a special front service. He understands what that means for the first time. Otto allows himself to cry, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Decades of words, years of deception, and the cost has become unbearable. In early 1943, the news of Stalingrad's defeat breaks silently within the ministry walls. Otto sees the casualty reports, the coded internal memos, the faces of men who realize what it means. Germany's illusion of invincibility is gone. But the public will never read those numbers. Instead, Goebbels delivers one of his most famous speeches, declaring the defeat a lesson in perseverance. The papers follow suit, turning disaster into inspiration. Otto writes the article as ordered, but ends it with a single sentence that escapes notice. No empire can silence the wind forever. It is his quiet rebellion, a truth disguised as poetry. In the following months, Otto's underground network expands again. Pastor Wilhelm Hartmann introduces new contacts, teachers, factory workers, and even a few soldiers who pass information discreetly. They gather testimonies, documents, and fragments of truth. Each risk their lives for words that may not be read until after the war. The Gestapo continues its silent hunt. Werner Koch reappears at Otto's door more often, asking subtle questions. Otto senses that suspicion has grown, but hides his fear behind routine. Meanwhile, Klaus decides to stay in Berlin, claiming he's unfit for further combat. Secretly, he joins the same resistance circle that works with Hartmann. Father and son now share the same secret purpose, each protecting the other without speaking of it openly. By late 1943, the once proud capital feels hollow. Bombings shake the nights, and whispers of defeat echo through the ruins. Still, the ministry orders headlines celebrating victory after victory. The gap between the printed world and the real one becomes a chasm. Otto's body weakens, but his will hardens. He no longer writes for approval or safety. He writes to bear witness. Every article he prints, every coded sentence he hides, becomes an act of defiance. He knows the end is approaching, for the Reich, for his paper, for himself. But he also knows that somewhere beyond the border, his words are already speaking for him. And in a time when the loudest voices belong to lies, a whisper of truth is enough to start an avalanche. The tide has turned, not just in war, but in the mind of a nation. Berlin, July 20th, 1944. The morning begins like countless others, quiet, gray, uneasy. But before noon, the silence cracks. Across the city, the word spreads. An attempt has been made on the Führer's life. Explosions in East Prussia. A brief flicker of hope, quickly extinguished. Within hours, the regime announces that the leader has survived. The radio floods with furious speeches. The atmosphere turns electric, charged with fear, suspicion, and vengeance. For Otto Braun, the moment feels like history catching its breath. He senses that everything he has feared and everything he has hoped for is converging at once. By afternoon, the Gestapo floods the streets. Lists are drawn, names are whispered, phones go dead. In the ministry, the mood shifts from panic to rage. The order comes swiftly. Root out the traitors. Silence the doubters. Cleanse the ranks. Otto knows the purge will not stop at the military. It will reach the press. When he arrives at the office of Berliner Tageblatt, the building is half empty. Desks overturned, papers scattered. He finds Werner Koch waiting at his desk, calm and composed, like a man who has been waiting a long time. "Good morning, Herr Braun," Koch says. His tone is polite, almost gentle. "We found something of yours." He gestures toward Otto's drawer. Two officers pull it open. Inside lies the small notebook Otto thought he had hidden too carefully, the one filled with coded entries and copied records from the ministry's directives. Koch opens it slowly. "An impressive collection," he says. "You've been very thorough." Otto doesn't respond. He knows the script now. Resistance, denial, pleading, they all end the same. Koch closes the book carefully and looks at him. "The ministry calls this treason by pen," he says. "But I call it obsession." He signals the officers. They take Otto by the arms and lead him out. The entire newsroom watches in silence. No one speaks. No one intervenes. They all understand that in times like these, even sympathy can be fatal. As Otto is taken away, he glances once more at the press machines. The rolls of paper still turn. The next edition will go out on schedule, filled with stories of loyalty, purity, and vengeance. His absence won't even leave a space. At the ministry, the interrogation is brief. Koch handles it personally. There's no shouting, no violence, only questions asked with professional detachment. "Who else helped you? Where is the original journal? How long have you been sending information abroad?" Otto answers carefully. He gives names of people who are already dead or abroad. He admits to writing the notebook, but insists it was only personal reflections, not espionage. Koch listens quietly, expression unreadable. When it's over, Otto is left in a small, windowless room. The walls hum faintly from nearby generators. Hours pass. Then a clerk enters with a typewritten document, his confession. It declares that he spread false information, undermined national morale, and betrayed the fatherland. He is told to sign. Refusal would mean nothing. The paper will bear his name either way. Otto takes the pen. His hand trembles, but his face stays calm. He reads each sentence slowly. The lies feel strangely familiar. He has spent years writing them. Now they are his own obituary. He signs. The next morning, the Berliner Tageblatt prints a short article on the front page. Former editor confesses to treasonous activity. Justice will be swift. No name is given, but everyone in the newsroom knows. They recognize the phrasing. Otto himself had approved similar notices before. The propaganda machine has absorbed his downfall as easily as it once absorbed his work. At home, Elsa and Klaus received the news indirectly. Two officials arrive, polite but cold. They ask questions, search the apartment, take away letters and photographs. Then they leave without explanation. Else finds Otto's old fountain pen on his desk and holds it tightly. Klaus says nothing. He has learned that grief, too, can be watched. Weeks pass. No official record of Otto's execution appears. His name is erased from the paper's archives. His portrait vanishes from the ministry's wall. He becomes what the system always feared most, a silence they cannot control. But somewhere, far beyond the borders of Germany, his truth already breathes. The journal he smuggled years earlier has been preserved in neutral hands. Its pages, written in coded phrases and quiet defiance, begin to circulate among foreign journalists. They translate his notes, cross-check his details, and confirm what many had suspected, that the German press is not misinformed, but enslaved. In the months that follow, Allied radio broadcasts begin quoting passages. Listeners across Europe hear excerpts describing the daily press briefings, the manipulation of headlines, the rewriting of history. Otto's words, stripped of his name, but alive with his voice, begin to undo the illusion he helped create. Inside Germany, the propaganda continues until the very end. Koch remains at his post, efficient as ever. Elsa and Klaus survive through caution and silence, but they keep one small object hidden, a fragment of Otto's handwriting, a single torn page that escaped seizure. On it are 6 words written in steady, deliberate script: truth delayed is not truth denied. No one knows exactly when Otto Braun's life ended. Some records suggest he perished in late 1944, others claim early 1945, but by then it no longer matters. His final edition was not printed on paper. It was written in memory, carried forward by those who understood that truth can outlive its author. As the Reich collapses into ruin, the presses that once printed his lies fall silent. And in that silence, Otto's real words, the ones he never could publish, begin to rise. Berlin, May 1945, the city is rubble. Smoke drifts where towers once stood. The streets that once carried parades of pride now carry only silence. The Reich, once promised to last 1,000 years, has ended in 12. When American and Soviet soldiers enter the capital, they find a ghost of the empire that tried to control truth itself. In the wreckage of the propaganda ministry, they uncover piles of files, slogans, memos, typed speeches, the blueprints of deception. Among them, in a drawer marked Evidence for Review, lies a small brown-covered notebook. It is Otto Braun's journal. The pages are brittle, the handwriting precise. Inside, investigators find a timeline of lies, dates, orders, and corrections. Each page matches known events: the Reichstag Fire, the Nuremberg Laws, the Night of Broken Glass, the strategic victories that were defeats. The Americans realize they've found something far more powerful than military intelligence. They've found the anatomy of manipulation. Elsa Braun and her son Klaus survived the war. Their apartment, though damaged, still stands. For weeks, they live in silence, waiting for soldiers to knock. But when American officers finally arrive, they are not there to accuse. They are there to listen. Klaus explains who his father was, a journalist who served the system publicly but fought it privately. He shows them the fragment of handwriting he kept hidden, those 6 words Otto had written near the end. Truth delayed is not truth denied. One of the American officers recognizes the phrase. It matches a passage from the decoded journal already being studied at Allied headquarters. For a moment, the room falls still. Otto's words have returned home, crossing the war he didn't live to see end. In the weeks that follow, American psychological warfare experts, men who have studied how nations think, examine Otto's writings. They compare his notes to the ministry's records and to Goebbels' directives. Together, they reveal the full structure of the Nazi propaganda machine, how it rewrote language, weaponized emotion, and trained millions to believe lies without question. The Americans publish parts of the journal in a report titled The Anatomy of Propaganda. Otto's identity remains anonymous, listed only as a German editor. But those who read it, journalists, historians, officers, know that behind those words was a man who tried to rescue truth from the machinery of deceit. Klaus begins working with the Allied Press Control Office, helping document how German media was corrupted. He reads his father's journal line by line, translating it into clear testimony. He learns how every headline had been shaped by fear, how every omission served power. For him, it is both education and mourning. One afternoon, an American journalist named David Harlan visits their home. He tells Elsa and Klaus that he read Otto's entries at headquarters. "Your husband saw what we all missed," Harlan says. "He showed how truth doesn't die in silence. It waits." Elsa listens, tears in her eyes. For years she feared Otto's struggle had been in vain. Now she realizes it had become part of something larger, a war fought not for territory, but for the mind. That summer, Klaus helps organize an exhibit for Allied troops in the ruins of the propaganda ministry. Behind shattered glass and burned banners, they display Otto's notebook alongside ministry directives. One case shows 2 pages side by side. One, the official printed headline. The other, Otto's hidden journal entry describing what really happened. Visitors stand quietly before them, reading the contrast between deception and truth. In the following years, Otto's notes are preserved by American archivists. They become source material for early studies on psychological warfare, used to train journalists and intelligence officers. His words, once buried under censorship, now serve as lessons in freedom. For Klaus, the legacy becomes personal mission. He remains in Berlin, teaching journalism under the Allied Reconstruction programs. Each lecture begins with his father's belief that the press is not simply an industry, but a nation's conscience. He tells his students, "My father wrote lies by day and truth by night. He paid the price so that one day we could tell both stories." Years later, Otto's journal, the original copy recovered from the ruins, is placed in the National Archives in Washington. Inside the cover, archivists preserve his final note, written in fading ink. "To those who will read this, know that silence is not consent, it is survival." But survival without truth is another kind of death. For historians, the notebook becomes a key to understanding how Hitler's Germany turned words into weapons, and how one man used the same weapon to fight back. For Elsa and Klaus, it remains something simpler. A voice returned from the grave. When the war ends, nations rebuild with brick and law. But the real reconstruction begins with truth. Otto Braun's story becomes part of that foundation, a reminder that democracy is not defended only by armies, but by the courage to speak honestly when honesty is forbidden. And though Otto never saw liberation, his words did. They crossed borders, survived fire, and reached the very people he hoped would find them. The journalist who died in silence left behind something louder than any headline. Proof that the mind, once freed, cannot be conquered again.